بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome to Usul al-Fiqh class. Today, inshallah, we will discuss important topic, which is the rules of interpretation. As we already mentioned, and as you should know by now, there is a purpose in Usul al-Fiqh. Why we study this subject? We're studying Usul al-Fiqh. The primary objective, as the author mentioned in the book, is to regulate ijtihad, to derive the rulings. These rulings that the mujtahid, the one who does the ijtihad, the one who is looking for the religious ruling, these rulings, they have system. There is some steps that you have to take. Otherwise, each one will say something different than the other. So, before we go through the rules of interpretation, we need to know that there are steps. These steps have to be taken. In general, in order for you to be able to derive the rulings, you need to know and you need to have a basic understanding of the language of the Quran and Sunnah. And that's what I told you last year, that we are here having a disadvantage because we are studying in English. That is helpful, but it is not like when you study in Arabic. Why? Because that's the language of the ruling. You need to have basic understanding of the language of the Quran and the Sunnah. Also, you need to have a firm grasp of the words of the text and the implications. Now, when we say the language of the text, we know the language is Arabic, but not only that. You need to know the language. When we say nowadays that this is the language of the youth, this is the language of this age, technology is the language of this age. The same thing, once you come across the Quran, once you read it more and more, you will be able to know to some extent, to come familiar, and that will help you. That's why I don't like it when some of you ask me, where is this ayah? Especially if I told you like it is in this surah, or it is in the beginning of the Quran, or at the end of the Quran. At this level now, yes, I don't say you have to memorize the entire Quran, but at least you need to know, if you hear the ayah, where you may find it. What are the topics that the Quran talked about? What is at the beginning? What is at the end? All these things are steps. And then scholars, some of them mentioned more steps, others mentioned less steps. Some of them are strict when it comes to deducing the rulings from the Quran and the Sunnah. Now, our work, your work as a student of knowledge, to derive the rulings of what? The clear ayat or the unclear ayat? Our work will be involving in what? To work with the unclear. Why? If it's clear, there is no need for your work. The more complicated the text is, the more work you need. What's the difference between educated and uneducated person? If the job could be done by anyone, why would you require more credentials, more experience, if it's the same? So your work is with the unclear ayat. And that's why we need to classify the sources, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Each one of them, what are the texts? What are the types of words that they say? All this will help you at the end. You will come to a level where once you hear the word, even if you don't memorize, you may say, this is from the Quran, or from this surah, or this is not from the Quran. One of the horrible mistakes of students of knowledge is to say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said so and so, and Allah did not say so and so. Or someone tells you something and you don't know, is it from the Quran or the Sunnah? You have to be able to know. Once you go further, the moment you hear a statement, you may say, this is very advanced level. This is a hadith or not a hadith. Only by hearing the words. Many scholars reach that level. So our work is to be able to understand the style of the Quran, of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how we can derive the rulings. Now we will talk about the types of words, because we are dealing with words. We are dealing with text. Text is composed of words. What are these words? There are different categories. The first category in regards to the clarity. We have two categories, clear and unclear ayat. Now remember again, the clear ayat or words, they don't really need from you that much. What needs from you a lot of work is the unclear. So basically we have clear ayat and unclear. The clear words, then they are divided. For instance, we have zahir. What's the meaning of zahir?
Apparent.
Apparent. Manifest.
Surface.
Surface.
Surface meaning one
Is that English? Surface meaning?
You can say that.
Good. Nas. What's the meaning of nas? Many times you hear scholars saying, وَهُوَ نَصٌ فِي الْمَسْأَلَةِ. Explicit. Specific. That's the meaning of nas. نَصَّ عَلَيْهِ. He mentioned it exclusively or explicitly. That's the meaning of. These are clear, which means they don't need from you really that work. And of course, we will take each one of them in details. Then we have another category from the viewpoint of its scope. We have homonym, we have general, mutajanis, am, khas, mutlaq, muqayyad. You should know at least the definition of those words, but again we will take each one of them separately. Is this word am? An-nas, which means all the people, or it is khas, the youth. It is only specific for the youth, or the students, so it is not for the teachers. Mutlaq, slave. What kind of slave? Old slave, adult slave, woman. Then we have from the viewpoint of their actual use. This is another category. Now, how many categories did we have? 3. This is the third one. From their actual use, there is haqiqi and majazi. Haqiqi and majazi. What do we mean by that? What's the meaning of haqiqi? True. But here in Usul al-Fiqh, literal. Majazi, figurative, metaphoric. You see, these divisions are very important. You need to read this ayah. It's not always that this is the meaning, clear, direct. Otherwise, there is no difference between ignorant and scholar. But the difficult job is how to determine that this is the meaning of the ayah, especially when the word has several meanings. Even if it has only 2 meanings, because we have many words that have more than 2 meanings. If it has only 2 meanings and you need to know, it is used for the actual or the figurative or the majazi. And from now on, we will use only those terms. You have to be accustomed to the Arabic terms, haqiqi and majazi. Haqiqi, the term that is used or that is used for what اللفظ المستعمل في موضع له. That's how we define it in Arabic. The literal. And it will come with us, inshallah. But I'll give you an example. When we say lion, asad, what do we mean by that? على الحقيقة. The animal. The animal that roars, that has big fangs. This is the real meaning. Can we say about someone he is lion?
Yeah.
Do we mean he is animal? He has 4 legs? What do we mean by that?
Fight.
He is courageous, he is strong. So if we say the lion came to the class, what do we mean by that? The animal or the courageous person?
Courage.
Courageous. Why not the animal? Which usually you take the literal or the metaphorical meaning. In principle. In principle, you take the metaphorical? In principle, usually, what meaning do you take?
You take the literal.
Literal. When we take the majaz,
I don't know how to say it, but when it's like impossible to fight literally.
no, it's not impossible. Now, let's take our example in the class. Is it impossible to have lion here in the class?
No, but I would
It's
say
not impossible,
it's
but
absurd.
yeah. So there is an evidence. There is qarina, what we call in Arabic qarina, indication. Because if a true lion came to the class, it would make national news that a lion came to a classroom. That's why we say the meaning here is what?
Majazi.
Majaz. But if you say, I saw a lion, what do you mean by that? First thing comes to mind what? The animal. So usually you take the words according to their real meaning. I saw a lion. When you tell me you saw a lion, I assume that you went to the zoo or you saw a lion on TV. It doesn't come to mind that you saw the courageous person. Unless you tell me with an indication that you did not mean the animal. Hand. What's the meaning of hand? What's the meaning? That's the meaning of hand. What's the meaning then?
A part of something. That's hand.
Part of something. What's the hand of the book?
And that's probably the most general meaning of hand.
What's the meaning of hand?
Hand and
Yad.
metaphorically power.
See,
Okay.
what's the meaning of hand?
Fingers and
It has something to do with the part of something.
part of
Again, if you say that definition,
part
give
of
me
the
the
body.
It's not like
give me the hand of the cell phone. Give me the hand of what's the hand of this?
Hand is a
I'm
part.
giving you a
No.
definition.
What's the hand?
Hand is a part of a body which has fingers and
Yes, this is the hand, the known hand.
Yeah.
Actually, sometimes it is very difficult to define something that is well known. What's the meaning of water? What's the definition of water?
Combination of hydrogen and oxygen.
Combination? No, that's not the definition of water. Because, no.
Clear, colorless liquid
Clear, colorless liquid,
which doesn't have a taste or flavor.
which doesn't have a taste or flavor. Yeah, that's very, very close definition to the water. Hand, in principle, means this hand. When we say he cut his hand, what do we mean by that? Oh, we think, let's say, we have 5, 6 meanings of hand, or we say it is hand.
it is
You know why? Because you said his. So you said the part of a human being. You said his hand.
Okay.
That's why.
Do we say he cut the book's hand?
Because the clock has a hand.
The clock?
The clock has a hand.
See, people laugh at you if you say that. Because there is none. But when I tell you, give me a hand, what do I mean by that?
help.
Help? I don't mean that I want your hand. Here, take. So when we say hand, what do we understand? The part or help?
Part.
Part. Then why we say it means also help? Because there is an indication here. When I tell you, give me a hand, I don't want your hand. I want your help. But sometimes it is not even that easy. When you have more than 3 or 4 meanings. Al-Muhsanat. What's the meaning of Muhsanat?
The one who reaches the bed.
Protected. Lower meaning.
What's the meaning of Muhsanat?
It means the one who does a
female
good
righteous person.
Female righteous person. Okay. Can a female righteous person commit adultery?
Yes.
She's righteous, yet she committed adultery. So if she's not righteous, what would she do?
No, she cannot because she's not muhsana. If she does, she's
So what's the meaning of muhsana?
a righteous woman.
A righteous woman, yet she commits adultery.
Do you want the literal meaning? Or
I want the meaning of muhsanat. In Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used muhsanat several times. And each time it is different. Muhsana could mean married woman. فَإِذَا أُحْصِنَّ, when they are married, فَعَلَيْهِنَّ نِصْفُ مَا عَلَى الْمُحْصَنَاتِ. When they are married, then their punishment is half of the married. Half of the free woman. So it came with the meaning of married woman. It came with the meaning of free woman. It came with chaste woman. So, see, there are different meanings. Ayn. إِنَّ الْمُتَّقِينَ فِي جَنَّاتٍ وَعُيُونٍ. What's the meaning of uyun?
rivers? Yeah.
Springs.
Springs.
So when I tell you, your ayn is beautiful, your river is beautiful, what do I mean by ayn?
Eyes.
Eye. When we say the Prophet ﷺ sent عيونه, أرسل عيونه, he sent eyes. What do we mean by that? He sent his rivers or he sent his eyes?
Spies.
Spies. How many meanings, you see?
And they have a kinaya.
How do we know that the meaning here is not the literal? When we say ayn, what's the meaning of ayn?
Eyes.
It have an indicator. You're right.
What's the meaning of ayn?
Eyes.
Eye.
Human organ, right? That you can see with. That's the meaning of ayn. But it has, alhamdulillah, it has other meanings. So remember, the situation is not easy. Yes?
For eyes in English, 27 definitions, just for as a noun. 27.
Eyes?
Yes.
Can you give us some? 27?
The hole in a needle. One of the round spots on the tip.
The hole in the needle.
Yeah, the hole in the needle is called the eye.
No, you see, that's not a separate meaning. Because in Arabic, you could say also the eye of the camera, which is the lens. You could say, that's not...
This is the usage that people use it for.
What's this website? That's not...
Dictionary.com.
But this is the English meaning of
Yes.
the word
Yeah.
eye, not the Arabic meaning of the word
I'll
eye.
give
Yeah.
you an example.
Yeah, example, another example.
A look, a glance,
A look.
or a gaze.
He took an eye? Okay.
Yeah. Take an eye on it. Keep an eye on it.
A center of light, intelligence.
A center of light,
Intelligence.
intelligence.
Those
Yeah.
are two different meanings.
Okay, so here is the point now. Again, sometimes the word is used in its primary, secondary, or customary sense. Customary, so it's not even the original meaning. Like what? Could you give me an example? When we use a word and what we mean by it, not the linguistic, but the customary meaning.
Like Asad.
Hmm?
Like Asad. Word Asad.
Asad.
When we say powerful,
No,
courageous
no.
man.
What we mean by customary is that this word used to mean something. And now we are using it for different thing. Why? Because just people used to call it this.
Yeah.
Asr. Salatul Asr. I pray Salatul Asr.
Asr.
Yeah. I didn't pray the prayer of the time. I prayed the Salatul Asr, the afternoon prayer. So we call it that. That's another good.
Salah, prayer. What's the meaning of prayer?
Dua.
Dua. supplication. That's the original meaning of salah. But then, when you say salah nowadays, what do I understand from this? Did you offer supplication or you offer prayer?
Prayer.
Prayer. What's that meaning? It is the customary meaning. And then it became the religious meaning of salah. Okay? So, I'm just trying to point your attentions to the different usage of the words. Now, we come to the important issue, which is the ta'wil. But before we continue, we need to read a little bit so we don't lose track. Please open the book. On page 118. The middle of the page, second paragraph, from the viewpoint.
From the viewpoint of their clarity, scope, and capacity to convey certain meaning, words have been classified into various types. With reference to their conceptual clarity, the ulama of Usul have classified words into the two main categories of clear and unclear words. The main purpose of this division is to identify the extent to which the meaning of a word is made clear or left ambiguous and doubtful.
If the word is clear, we don't need that much work. But when the word is unclear, qur, it means menstruation, it means purification. We need to look for the indications. Did it mean this or did it mean that? But if it was clear, why we do the work? It is clear.
The significance of this classification can readily observed in the linguistic forms and implications of commands and prohibitions. The task of evaluating the precise purport of a command is greatly facilitated if one is able to ascertain the degree of clarity or of ambiguity in which it is conveyed. Thus the manifest, zahir, and explicit nas are clear words, and yet the jurist may abandon their primary meaning in favor of a different meaning as the context and circumstances may require.
Okay. Next, the next paragraph, from the viewpoint of their actual use.
From the viewpoint of their actual use, such as whether a word is used in its primary, secondary, literal, technical, or customary sense.
So see how many usages for the word? From only one category.
Customary sense, words are once again divided into the two main categories of literal and metaphorical. The methodology of Usul al-Fiqh tells us, for example, the commands and prohibitions may not be issued in metaphorical terms, as this would introduce uncertainty in their application.
Yeah. If we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, establish, but He did not mean really. What do you mean He did not mean really? Scholars agreed that whenever there is a command, in principle, that command necessitates what? Obligation. If there is a prohibition, you have to avoid, that means you cannot do it. It is haram, unless there is another evidence. So these rulings, they don't come in the metaphorical term. Otherwise, it will be confusing. Now, we will move to the issue of ta'wil. Ta'wil here, if you see in the book, it says allegorical interpretation. That's only one of the meanings. But what's the meaning of ta'wil?
Clear? Clear?
Clear? Ta'wil.
To reinterpret.
Reinterpret.
Yes.
Why not to interpret?
Tafsir is interpret.
Yeah, what's the difference between ta'wil and tafsir?
To reinterpret.
Why you reinterpret? Why not interpret?
And I don't know what I'm saying.
I got one for you.
Ta'wil is tafsir. And we have scholars of tafsir who called their books Kitab al-Ta'wil, means tafsir, interpretation. One of the famous scholars of tafsir, he's like the Sheikh al-Mufassirin, Ibn Jarir al-Tabari rahimahullah. What's the name of his book? Jami' al-Bayan fi Ta'wil Ayah al-Quran. Every time there is an ayah, he says, Al-Qawl fi Ta'wil Ayat Kada. The Ta'wil, the interpretation of this ayah. That's the meaning of Ta'wil. But that's not the only meaning. We have interpretation and explanation. Ta'wil could be the outcome of the thing. Like what? Yusuf alayhi salam, when he told his father, قال يا أبتي هذا تأويل رؤياي من قبل. What did he mean by that? Tafsir. What do you mean by tafsir here?
Tafsir in the interpretation of my dream.
No. What's the meaning here? When he said that, Yusuf alayhi salam, when did he say that?
When they all of them bowed to him,
Yeah, when they all of them did that.
his living brother and his mother and his father.
Yeah. Is that the tafsir of his dream? Or that's the reality and the outcome of the dream? Because the interpretation was earlier, many, many years ago. That the 11 planets, the sun and the moon, are prostrating to him. So he was told that this is the meaning, that people will bow to you. And then it happened. So the interpretation was early. So again, then what's the difference between ta'wil and tafsir? If we say ta'wil is interpretation, ta'wil is tafsir. Here in Usul al-Fiqh we use it for a specific term. And this is the definition of it in Usul al-Fiqh. Changing the apparent meaning of the word for an evidence. That's what we will talk about. Or in Arabic we say حمل اللفظ على معنى مرجوح لدليل, for an evidence. Because in general, again, do you take the word for its apparent meaning or ambiguous meaning?
Yeah.
Apparent meaning, because that's when I tell you, give me $10. Will you give me 10 Canadian dollars or 10 American dollars?
American one.
Why?
Because the
You will give me 10 American dollars and I will tell you, what is this? And you will tell me, well, you did not specify. Is that acceptable?
no.
Why it is not? Because we know what do you mean by that. So usually when a word is used, you have to take it to its apparent meaning. That's what people do. That's what sane people do. But what if you used it for another thing? If there is an evidence, then yes, that's what we mean by ta'wil. Yes.
So I'm trying to understand, I know it's a crazy question, but the example with the lion. The lion is in the class.
A lion in class, yeah.
What's the indicator that it's not an animal?
It's not an animal? Do we usually have zoo here in the class?
No, you don't.
Okay, so
But how can I say that you don't actually have the lion in there? What evidence is there to say that the lion is not actually in the class? You said it, so I want to take it on a literal meaning. Why can't I?
if you want to take it on literal meaning, you have two possibilities. Whether you are assuming that people got killed, or like where he came from. Do we have lions just walking around, roaming the streets? It is very obvious.
So you say that it's called the obvious meaning. Obviously, he couldn't be there.
Of course.
Obviously, it have to be a person.
Yeah, logically.
Okay. Well, I got it.
Again, this is the definition of ta'wil. That's the author's definition of ta'wil. Departure from the manifest meaning of a text in favor of another meaning, where there is evidence to justify the departure. I like the previous one, very shorter. Changing the apparent meaning for an evidence. Now, to you, you may say, it makes sense to me that the real animal came to the class. And that's the problem. When some people argue and they say, the meaning is not the apparent meaning. Okay, fine. What's the evidence? They don't have an evidence. They say logically, it makes more sense. It is so and so. And that's the problem with the people of deviant sects in terms of aqidah. Because in aqidah, when we mentioned the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what did they do? Mu'tazila, Asha'ira, they did ta'wil. They said, that's not the apparent meaning. We don't take the apparent meaning. Why? There is a reason. There is an evidence. What's that evidence? That evidence is logic. If we say it is the real meaning, that necessitates so and so. Allah is like His creation. So it is not. That's a door for many deviation. Therefore, what counts here, if this is a correct ta'wil or not, this is acceptable ta'wil or not, the qarina, the indication, the evidence. Is it valid or not? Even the Rafidah, they say, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تَذْبَحُوا بَقَرَةً. That cow meant what, according to them? Aisha radiallahu anha. Is there an evidence? No, they don't have an evidence. So, the point here is to see what are the evidences. That does not mean logic is not a factor. It is a factor, but we don't put it before the Book of Allah or the Sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Just like the dollar example. Give me an ayah in the Book of Allah or the Sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam that it says it has to be American dollars. It's not about ayah or hadith. It is about what we are accustomed. If we are in Canada and he gave you 10 American dollars, is that acceptable? They are more expensive, American dollars, right? No one would do it. But you would say, I want Canadian dollars. He would tell you, no, you did not tell me. You say that's what is known. It doesn't need an evidence. And therefore, sometimes when the word is used so extensively in the other meaning until it became known for that meaning, which was not the original, then you have to take it for the other meaning. Just like salah, prayer. In English, if a non-Muslim said prayer, what do you understand from it? Allahu Akbar and this prayer, or dua, supplication? Supplication. But in Islam, when you say prayer, what do you understand from it? The 5 prayers. What is the essential meaning? What's the original one? Is it the 5 prayers or the supplication? Even in Arabic, it is the supplication. Then why we use it for the salah? Because it became common. That's the use. And it is the religious use also. And this will come in the connotations of the words. Do we take the religious meaning, or the linguistic meaning, or the customary meaning? Now, as I told you, ta'wil is not for anyone. There are important steps in order for you to do ta'wil. Now, just like that question, when you say, why not the animal came to the class? Because if we open that door to everyone, then you will not take any ayah for real. you will say, no, that did not mean this. It means another thing. We have conditions for ta'wil in order for it to be accepted. First of all, there has to be some evidence. There is an evidence. If there is no evidence, you cannot do ta'wil. You need an evidence for the ta'wil. Number two, the word is amenable to ta'wil. If the word has only one meaning, do we say there is a possibility of ta'wil? It's only one meaning. But when there is more than one meaning, then there is a possibility of ta'wil with an evidence. Number three, the word has propensity. You need to look into the context. You need to look on the other meanings. And then, which is very, very important, the person who attempts ta'wil is qualified. Ta'wil is not open for anyone. Otherwise, everyone will do ta'wil and everything will be messed up. There has to be qualified people, scholars, students of knowledge. They are the ones who do ta'wil. They are the ones who verify. This word could mean this or not. There is an evidence. Is that evidence valid or not? Okay, let's read from the book. Page 119. Yeah, 119.
Ta'wil.
Go ahead.
Ta'wil. It should be noted at the outset that in Arabic there are two common words for interpretation, namely tafsir and ta'wil. The latter is perhaps closer to interpretation.
The latter.
The latter is perhaps closer to interpretation, whereas tafsir literally means explanation.
So what's the difference between interpretation and explanation? It's very important because I may ask you, what's the difference between ta'wil and tafsir? I already told you that they may come to the same meaning, but sometimes they are different. Okay, go on. You will find the answer. The answer is here.
The English equivalents of these terms do not convey the same difference between them that is indicated in their Arabic usage. The allegorical interpretation is an acceptable equivalent of ta'wil, but I prefer the original Arabic to its English equivalent. I propose therefore to explain the difference between tafsir and ta'wil and then to use ta'wil as it is. Tafsir basically aims at explaining the meaning of a given text and deducing a hukum from it within the confines of its words and sentences. The explanation so provided is, in other words, borne out by the content and linguistic composition of the text. Ta'wil, on the other hand, goes beyond the literal meaning of words and sentences and reads into them a hidden meaning which is often based on speculative reasoning and ijtihad.
So which requires more effort, tafsir or ta'wil? Ta'wil. Ta'wil is a further step over tafsir. Where's your book? Go ahead.
The norm in regard to words is that they impart their obvious meaning. Ta'wil is a departure from this norm and is presumed to be absent unless there is reason to justify its application.
So in general, what is used? The ta'wil or the tafsir? Tafsir. When do we use ta'wil? If there is an indication, if there is an evidence. When do we take the hidden meaning or the uncommon meaning over the common, over the clear meaning? When there is an evidence or indication.
To support the meaning that
Yeah, sometimes what do we mean by evidence is not like ayah or hadith, but the context. Look at the context. When we say the lion came and he sat in the first row. Now, is there any possibility that I meant the animal? The lion came and sat in the first row.
no.
Very small possibility. Very small. He could have been a cub. So he could sit.
He could be in a cub. He could have been educated in circus and right?
Yes.
But would someone say that? It's apparent that I meant the courageous man. From a juridical perspective, next paragraph.
From a juridical perspective, a ta'wil and tafsir share a basic purpose, which is to clarify the law and to discover
Both of them, that's their purpose, to clarify the law, discover the ruling.
the intention of the lawgiver in the light of the indications given, some of which may be definite and others more remote. Both are primarily concerned with the speech that is not self-evident and requires clarity.
Okay, so we are more concerned with what is not self-evident. Because if it's self-evident, you don't have anything to do with it. Not much work left for you. Okay, next page, 120. Underline the entire page. How about that? Second paragraph.
The ulama of Usul have defined ta'wil as a departure from...
So this is the definition of ta'wil. What is the definition of ta'wil? It is here.
Have defined ta'wil as departure from the manifest zahir meaning of a text in favor of another meaning, where there is evidence to justify the departure.
Okay, and then look through the page. You will find the 4 conditions for the ta'wil are there. Okay, and then he tells you that there are 2 types of ta'wil at the end of the page, with examples from the Quran. And with this we will conclude this session. That's the first thing. This is the introduction. Now, what will come next is really important. Classification of words. What's the category of this word? Is it zahir? Is it nas? Why? Because based on each one, there is a ruling. Like, if the word is manifest and there is no evidence for ta'wil, can you do ta'wil? You have to take the apparent meaning. So if the apparent meaning means obligation, then there is a ruling, which is obligation. But if the apparent meaning means something, while there is an evidence that the ayah meant the other one, not the apparent meaning, then the ruling is different. So what will come next is really important about the words and how we deduce the law. Any questions?
So if you change a meaning in the ta'wil than it was in the tafsir, you have to have an evidence that that word that you changed the meaning for, that's what it means.
Yeah.
That's what they mean.
Yeah, you need an evidence.
Okay. An evidence from...
Otherwise, everyone will change the word and say, that's what it meant, not what you say.
An evidence from Quran or Sunnah or Sha'r Jahiliyyah, the 3 things that we said about.
No. The evidence here could be indication, qarina, the context.
Okay.
Could be ayah, could be the language. Because it is known linguistically that when I say إِنَّ الْمُتَّقِينَ فِي جَنَّاتٍ وَعُيُونٍ, what's the evidence here? Give me an ayah says that uyun here in this ayah means rivers or springs. I take the apparent meaning. It means they are in gardens and eyes. But it doesn't make sense. No one would say that. Yes?
Can we say that the tafsir is much more general and ta'wil is something that is done, that's possibly done inside of tafsir?
Ta'wil is done inside tafsir. That's possible, and the opposite is also possible. Tafsir is part of ta'wil. Because we could say every tafsir is ta'wil, but not every ta'wil is tafsir. That's possible also. So it depends how you look at it. Is it not recommended to make ta'wil unless they know the meaning of the whole Quran? Yes, that's true. But in what sense? Because again, if you mean by ta'wil tafsir, no, you can do tafsir based on the steps. Tafsir with the Quran, tafsir with the Sunnah. But if you mean by ta'wil changing the apparent meaning of a word for an evidence, then, as I said, there are steps. You need those steps. Okay, we'll stop here inshallah. هذا وصلى الله وسلم على محمد وصحبه أجمعين.